Hi, my name's Ardelia, and last night, my son invited me to his engagement party, but told me to sit near the trash. He smiled on stage, thanked his father, toasted his fiancé's family, and never said my name. Not once. I gave him a necklace passed down from generations. He let someone else take credit for it. I brought a gift. They returned it in silence. They celebrated a life I built, but rewrote it without me. Why would a son go to such lengths to erase his own mother? And more importantly, why did I let them? Keep watching. The invitation came in the form of an email. No phone call, no handwritten envelope. Just a generic digital note with the words, "You're invited to celebrate the engagement of Darian and Vera," followed by a date, time, and a venue in Santa Clara. I clicked it open on my laptop, alone at my kitchen table, the heater humming softly behind me. But what caught me off guard wasn't the medium or the message. It was the name. It didn't say Ardelia, my name. It read Elaine Thomas. Elaine, my ex-husband's new wife. Not even his current one. They'd split 5 years ago. The name stung, but not because it was a mistake. No, this wasn't a typo. It was a message. For days, I went back and forth. I wrote a reply, then deleted it. I told myself I wouldn't go. Then I reminded myself I carried Darian for 9 months, raised him through fevers, football seasons, and FAFSA forms. I gave him every ounce of my energy. No email, no wrong name, no new woman would stop me from showing up to the moment my son announced a new chapter of his life. So I ironed my best winter shawl, the one I used to wear to church, and drove the 2.5 hours from Bakersfield to Santa Clara. I rehearsed what I'd say when I saw him. Something simple, something proud. Maybe just, "You look good, son." Maybe that would be enough. The venue was beautiful. White roses lined the entry path. Twinkling lights framed the entrance, and soft music played from a string quartet just inside. My heels clicked across polished marble as I stepped through the doors, clutching the printed invite I'd brought just in case someone questioned me. I held it tight like a badge of honor, despite the wrong name scrawled on top. Inside, laughter echoed. People in gowns and tuxedos sipped champagne, hugged old friends, and posed for pictures beneath a giant floral archway. I scanned the crowd until I saw him, Darian, across the room. He stood beside Vera, both glowing under the chandelier's soft light. He looked polished. Perfect. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did and chose to turn away. I couldn't tell. Before I could move toward him, a young woman with a headset approached. She looked flustered, but smiled professionally. "Ma'am, may I help you find your seat?" I nodded, still holding out the invitation. She glanced at it, tapped on a tablet, then smiled again. Tight-lipped this time. "Right this way, you're at table, near the service area." I followed her past rows of gold-rimmed plates and crystal wine glasses, through groups of guests laughing and clinking forks. She led me toward a back corner, past the buffet, past the kitchen doors. And there it was. A folding metal chair, a paper placemat, plastic utensils, next to the trash bins. A swinging kitchen door flapped open and shut, sending out bursts of steam and the occasional clang of dishes. One of the staff looked at me and then quickly looked away. I sat. The chair wobbled slightly. The edge of the tablecloth had been tucked under the leg of another chair, and someone had left a half-empty water bottle in front of me. There were no name cards, no floral arrangement, just a napkin, creased and stained, and a butter knife that didn't match the fork. I straightened my coat, folded my hands in my lap, tried to focus on the string music drifting in from the main hall. Every so often, laughter erupted. Every time it did, it reminded me of where I was not. From my corner, I could see the main table, where Vera's parents sat beaming, surrounded by well-dressed relatives. Their chairs were cushioned, their wine glasses already refilled. I watched as Vera leaned into Darian's shoulder, her hand resting on his arm as if to say, "We've made it!" And Darian smiled. That wide, camera-ready smile. He raised a glass, one I'm certain I helped buy when he first moved into his college dorm, and made a toast. I couldn't hear the words from where I sat, but the room applauded. Someone stood to clap. Others dabbed their eyes. I wondered, in that moment, when I had become the detail they wanted forgotten. The line they skipped over. The picture they cropped out. A server pushed past me, dragging a gray trash bin. It bumped my chair lightly, but I didn't react. I didn't flinch. I'd learned long ago how to stay still when the world brushed me aside. Then, I saw him. Darian. For a brief second, his eyes met mine. There was no surprise in his face, no guilt, just a flicker of something I couldn't name. Then he looked away. I turned back to the cold bread roll in front of me. My phone buzzed in my purse. I pulled it out. It was a message from Darian. "Mom, just please, don't make a scene." I didn't respond to his message. I let the phone drop gently into my lap, screen still glowing with the words, "Mom, just please, don't make a scene." The irony was sharp enough to draw blood. If he'd wanted a scene, he would have gotten one years ago. This was restraint. A mother sitting quietly at the edge of a night that was supposed to celebrate her son. The microphone squeaked, and all eyes turned toward the front of the room. Darian took the stage with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this before. Toasts, conferences, awards. He always knew how to hold a room. He stood tall, smile steady, one hand in his pocket, and the other on the mic stand like he owned the moment. And maybe he did. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "Tonight isn't just about Vera and me. It's about the people who helped us become who we are." There it was. The preamble to a thank you list. My fingers tightened around the edge of the table. He looked at Silas, my ex-husband, the man who vanished when Darian turned 9, and raised his glass. "Dad, thank you for being a guiding force. Your steadiness, your wisdom. It shaped me." A wave of applause rippled through the room. Then, he turned to Vera's parents. "And to Marjorie and Robert. Thank you for welcoming me like your own. You've shown me what family means." More clapping. Someone whistled. I waited. Not in hope. Hope had long ago packed its bags and left, but in form. Out of habit. Maybe he'd stumble, maybe he'd remember. Maybe he'd say my name, even once. But he didn't. He moved on to the future, spoke about careers, shared dreams, travel plans. And I sat there, invisible in plain sight. My face didn't twitch, not even when the guests laughed at his jokes or when someone murmured, "He's so polished, isn't he?" I heard it all, like distant thunder through double-paned glass. My fingers ached. I hadn't realized I'd been clenching them so tightly. Slowly, I released them, letting my palms fall open on the cheap linen of the table. I glanced at my purse. Inside it was a wallet, lipstick, a tissue folded 4 times, and 23 years of my life. The world around me blurred for a second. Not from tears. I hadn't cried in public since the divorce. It was a dizzying clarity, the moment where years of memories rise like ghosts you never buried properly. I saw myself packing his lunches at 5 a.m., just so he wouldn't eat cafeteria food. Working nights at the school library, watching him nap on the beanbag chair in the corner. Staying up with him through SAT prep, holding his hand through heartbreak, moving boxes into dorm rooms while Silas sent text messages from Aruba. I remembered graduation. It had just been the 2 of us. He wore that ill-fitting robe, and I'd held the camera with one hand and the flowers with the other. He'd pulled me in for a photo and whispered, "Everything I am is because of you." Apparently, that had an expiration date. My phone buzzed again. "Darian, I just wanted things to go smoothly, okay?" I stared at the screen, then typed, "Smooth for who?" I didn't send it. Instead, I flipped the phone face down, lifted the glass of lukewarm water in front of me, and brought it to my lips. Not for him. For me. The applause swelled as Darian handed the mic to someone else. Vera walked up and kissed him on the cheek. Cameras flashed. A man behind me whispered, "Such a lovely couple. He's lucky to have her family." I didn't turn, didn't blink. But in that moment, something shifted. I stopped hoping to be seen. I started preparing to be heard. They dimmed the lights just after dessert. A soft chime rang out through the speakers, and the MC tapped the microphone again, this time with an air of scripted formality. Before we close out the evening, we invite the couple to receive gifts and blessings from their families. I sat up straighter, adjusting the hem of my coat, smoothing invisible wrinkles. My heart began to beat harder, not from nerves, but from something closer to resolve. This moment, at least, was mine. I had chosen carefully, a velvet box with a clasp worn smooth by generations. Inside it lay a necklace passed down from my mother, and from hers before her. Darian had seen it once when he was 9. He had asked, "Can I give this to someone when I'm older?" And I had smiled, tucked it away, and said, "When the time is right." The time was now. I'd handed it to Vera 3 days earlier at her suggestion. "We can wrap it early," she'd said, "to make sure everything looks coordinated." I didn't question it. I should have. The MC's voice rang clear. This beautiful heirloom was gifted by the bride's family, a symbol of legacy and love. Vera's mother beamed. She stood, glided forward, with a grace only afforded to women who've never had to fight for space in a room, and handed the box to Vera in front of the crowd. I didn't move. I didn't blink. But I felt the sting. Not the betrayal itself. That was expected by now. It was the ease of it. How cleanly it was done. How polished. The lie was delivered with velvet gloves. I watched as Vera opened the box. Her eyes sparkled like she was seeing it for the first time. Maybe she was. Or maybe she'd rehearsed the reaction. Either way, she clasped the necklace around her neck, looked at her mother, and whispered something that made them both laugh. My hands rested on my lap, fingers folded tight. I didn't stand. I didn't interrupt. The applause felt like applause always does when it's not for you. Sharp, hollow, echoing in places you thought had gone quiet. Someone next to me whispered, "What a beautiful piece. So thoughtful of her mom to pass it down." My gaze stayed forward. The MC transitioned with practiced ease. Let's turn our attention now to a small video tribute prepared by the couple. The lights faded again. A montage flickered to life across the far wall. Darian's baby pictures, his school years, first car, college graduation, friends, teachers, Vera, her family, laughter, celebrations, but not me. I sat there, blinking at the screen, waiting for the part that included the woman who packed every lunch, who paid for football cleats instead of her own dental work. The woman who held his hand when he cried at night and told him he was going to be more than his father ever was. That woman never showed up. Photo after photo slid by. His first bike ride, cropped. I remembered the original shot. I was holding the back of the seat, running beside him. In the version on screen, just the bike and Darian, all confidence, no mother in sight. Another image, a picnic in the park. That day, we'd brought our dog, Sammy. I had made egg salad. Darian had grass stains on his jeans. In the video, it was just him and the dog. The corner where I'd sat had been blurred out, softened to nothing. Tears didn't come. That would have made it easier, wouldn't it? Easier to explain, easier to dismiss. But no, this was worse. This was a silence that didn't ask to be broken. I sat through the entire thing. Guests around me murmured, smiled, dabbed at their eyes. "Such a perfect story," someone whispered. Perfect, I thought, because they erased the parts that didn't fit. The lights came back up. Everyone clapped. I didn't. My hands had gone cold. My lap felt heavy. My heart? It wasn't broken, not in the dramatic, shattered glass sense. It was being rewritten. And that's a different kind of pain, one that doesn't scream, one that sinks. I stayed seated as the chairs began to shift, as people stood and hugged and laughed. I stayed there, fingers still, watching, listening, taking note, not to punish, to remember. The lights came back up slowly, as if the room needed time to wake up from its polished dream. People blinked, reached for their wine glasses, dabbed the corners of their eyes. Clinks and murmurs filled the air again, like someone had hit resume on a party that never noticed what was missing. I remained seated for a moment longer, letting the crowd move before I did. My breath was tight and short, but I wouldn't give anyone the show they were hoping I might slip into. I pushed my chair back carefully, rose to my feet, and stepped into the blur of satin gowns, cologne, and soft laughter. It wasn't silence that followed me. It was disinterest. As I walked past a group of guests near the chocolate fountain, a woman glanced at me with brief recognition. She smiled, nodded, and then turned quickly to whisper something to the man beside her. He glanced up, gave a tight-lipped grin, then looked down at his phone like it had just buzzed. It hadn't. I moved toward the outer edge of the room, tracing the perimeter like a ghost. Two young women in floor-length navy dresses stood by a table, sipping champagne. One of them looked at me, opened her mouth as if to say something, then paused and turned back toward the dance floor. It wasn't that they didn't know who I was. They did. It's that they didn't want anyone else to. My eyes settled on the dessert table. There she was, Vera, glowing under the warm overhead lights, laughing with her mother as if the night had been pulled straight from a magazine shoot. Her hair, her gown, even her posture, it was all curated. Everything placed just right, not a strand or syllable out of place. I walked toward her. She didn't notice me at first. She was mid-laugh when she turned. Her expression dropped a fraction of an inch when she saw me, but she caught it before it fell all the way. "Ardelia," she said, just above a whisper. Her voice was syrupy, the kind you pour over a lie to make it easier to swallow. I didn't return the pleasantry. I leaned in slightly. "Why did you lie about the necklace?" She blinked once, then again. I watched her eyes shift, not out of confusion, but calculation. Her voice dropped, and she leaned in so close I could smell the vanilla on her breath. "Maybe," she said, soft but sharp, "if you'd been more of a mother, you'd still be part of this family." My spine stiffened, but I didn't speak. My mouth didn't move, not even a twitch. I stepped back, slow and deliberate, as if measuring the distance between us wasn't just physical. The room around us buzzed on, plates clinked, champagne flutes refilled. No one noticed. Or maybe they did and chose not to. It didn't matter. A server with a tray of mini cheesecakes turned the corner and saw me, then stepped quickly to the side, muttering an apology, though I hadn't said a word. I walked toward the hallway, the noise behind me growing more distant with each step. My heels clicked gently against the polished floor until the corridor hushed them. Against the wall, I rested my hand for balance, though I didn't need it. It was the kind of pose people assumed when they wanted to look composed. I stayed like that, letting the coldness from the marble seep into my skin. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, God knows I was, but because tears would have made her words true. And they weren't. I remembered Darian when he was 5, barefoot on the back porch, his cheeks sticky from a popsicle, arms wide as he ran into me after preschool. "Mom!" he used to say like the word itself had its own melody. That boy didn't exist anymore. Neither did the mother he once adored. And maybe that was the most honest part of the night. When I finally returned to my table, no one noticed. No heads turned. No hushed murmurs followed me. I picked up my water glass. My hand was steady. This wasn't grief anymore. This was clarity. I re-entered the main hall like someone walking back into a dream they didn't belong in. This time, though, I wasn't shrinking. I didn't lower my gaze or round my shoulders. I kept my head up and my steps slow, measuring every inch between me and the people who had spent the night pretending I didn't exist. The music had changed, lighter now, jazzy, something upbeat to bring people back into celebration mode. But I wasn't part of that rhythm. I walked against it. A woman in a lavender shawl approached me near the drink station, beaming. She looked vaguely familiar. Someone from Vera's side, I assumed. "You must be Darian's aunt," she said, with a cheeriness that was almost innocent. Almost. I'm his mother, I replied evenly. Her smile flickered, and her mouth opened just enough for an apology that never formed. She turned, nodded unnecessarily, and walked away, quick, awkward, clumsy in her heels. Darian was only a few feet away. He saw it. He heard it. He did nothing. That silence, his, hurt more than her words. It was confirmation that I was easier to erase than to acknowledge, easier to fold into the background than stand beside in the light. I drifted toward the hallway display, where the staff had set up a gallery of Darian's life in photos. It stretched the length of the wall, white frames, matching fonts, perfectly spaced. Each picture had a label underneath: first day of school, high school prom, graduation day. I scanned them like a stranger. None of them had me in them, not one. I leaned in closer to the photo marked college move-in. I remembered taking it. He'd been standing in front of the car, boxes stacked high behind him, that goofy smile he always had when he was nervous. But now, the version here had been cropped. Just him and his suitcase. The corner where I stood, holding his dorm key, was gone. The one labeled winter formal showed him in a tuxedo, arms around friends. I remembered that night vividly. I'd driven him there after Vera canceled last minute, and he didn't want to go alone. He never thanked me for stepping in. I never asked him to. I moved to the final photo. Senior thesis presentation. I had stood in the back of that room, in a floral blouse, holding a cup of gas station coffee, while he spoke about media psychology like he'd invented the term. I had cried that night. The picture here showed only his profile and a blurred audience behind him. I was erased with a perfect lens. Footsteps clicked behind me. I turned. Silas. He gave me a brief nod as he passed, not stopping. No words. Just acknowledgement without substance. As if we were two strangers in a hotel lobby who'd once shared a cab. I thought for a moment about stopping him, about asking, "Why did you let this happen?" Or, "Do you really believe you deserve all this applause?" But I didn't. Because I knew the answer. It was simpler to forget me, easier to polish the story without the woman who cleaned up after the mess. And I, after tonight, was done making things easier for other people. I continued walking until I reached a mirror mounted on the side wall, partially hidden behind a decorative sconce. In its reflection, I saw the woman everyone was so determined to rewrite. I adjusted my scarf, ran a finger along the edge of my jawline, and spoke softly. "You are not who they said you were." The lights behind me flickered for a second, but I didn't turn. I didn't need anyone else to agree. I only needed to remember. From my coat pocket, I pulled out my phone. I didn't open the messages. I didn't check the time. Instead, I opened the Notes app and typed, "Things I remember that they want erased." I paused, then added the first line. I was there. The clinking of glasses faded just enough for the MC's voice to cut through. "Before we conclude this wonderful evening," he said, with that sing-song cadence only people with microphones use, "we'd like to invite Darian's father, Silas, to share a few words." The crowd applauded before he even stood up. I didn't move. Just stayed near the back, arms folded loosely, eyes sharp, lips pressed in a line. My heels felt glued to the floor, not from hesitation, but from something closer to finality. Silas walked toward the stage like he belonged there, like he had earned every step. Same confident gait, same smug smile. He adjusted the mic, nodded toward the front rows, and began. "I just want to say how proud I am of my son," he said, placing his hand on his chest. "Raising Darian has been the greatest privilege of my life. Watching him become the man he is today, it's been humbling. Humbling." I almost laughed. Silas hadn't raised anything but his glass at dinner parties. He hadn't sat beside Darian through asthma attacks, hadn't driven him to band rehearsals, hadn't stayed up during finals week brewing coffee while proofreading term papers he didn't understand. But no one in that room knew that. or cared. The applause came loud and eager, like they'd been waiting to celebrate the man who'd shown up just in time for the camera flash. Someone behind me whispered, "So that's his dad. He must be so proud." I didn't flinch. Not because I didn't feel the stab, but because I'd run out of places for it to land. Then I noticed something. Back at my table, still untouched, was the gift envelope I'd placed discreetly inside the box Vera had taken earlier that week. I'd left it with the necklace, a card tucked neatly inside, with a handwritten note and a check. It wasn't about the money. It never was. It was about presence, legacy, belonging. Now it was back. Same seal, unbroken. No note, no explanation, just returned, like me. I walked toward the table, slipped the envelope into my purse without opening it, and turned back toward the center of the room. I didn't head for the exit. Not yet. Instead, I stood near a pillar by the floral arch and pulled out my phone. Opened the family group chat. My hands didn't shake. First, I uploaded the photo of the necklace. The one I'd taken back when it was still in my possession. The velvet box half open on my kitchen table. Soft sunlight hitting the chain just right. Then I typed, "I gave this, and that will be the last thing I ever give." I hit send. The message sat there, visible to everyone in that perfect little circle of people who had spent the evening pretending I was an afterthought. Then, one by one, the indicators began popping up. Darian is typing. Vera is typing. I didn't read a word. I exited the thread, scrolled to the top, and removed myself from the group. The room hadn't changed. The music played on. Silas was back at his seat, laughing with someone who didn't know enough to doubt his speech. But something had shifted. I walked past Darian and Vera without a glance. Neither of them tried to stop me. I didn't expect them to. I didn't want them to. I returned to the table for the last time. Most of the guests had moved on, gathering by the dance floor or filtering toward the valet line. The music had shifted again, now barely audible beneath the clatter of plates being cleared. That corner of the room, my corner, had taken on the scent of something past its expiration. The air hung with a mixture of stale appetizers and the sharp tang of industrial cleaner. My chair was damp. Someone had spilled a drink and walked away. No one had wiped it down. The paper placemat had soaked through and wrinkled, curled at the corners like it wanted to disappear. I didn't sit. As I reached for my coat draped over the back, a young man in a black catering uniform approached with a tray of used wine glasses. He glanced at me briefly, then gestured toward the table with a forced smile. "Ma'am, this section is for staff cleanup now. Are you lost?" I turned toward him slowly. No rush, no alarm. Just enough pause to let the moment expand in his chest. "No," I said, my voice low and clear. "But maybe you are. I'm the groom's mother." His face blanched. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Mumbled something about, "So sorry," and stepped backward so fast he nearly tripped on a tray cart. Around us, the few remaining guests and a couple of other staff members quieted. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to scold. The silence did the work for me. I adjusted my scarf, one final time, and walked to the far end of the hall, away from the noise, away from the people still pretending I hadn't been part of this family from the very beginning. I didn't head for the door, not yet. Instead, I took out my phone and reopened the group chat I had exited earlier. My fingers moved steadily, not angry, not trembling, just decided. I uploaded 3 photos. The first, my invitation, misprinted with another woman's name. The second, the necklace I'd pulled from the velvet box before handing it over, still in my hand, taken on my kitchen counter under warm light. And the last, a photo I had snapped hours earlier of the table I'd been assigned. The corner near the trash bins, the plastic fork, the dented chair, no place card, no welcome. I typed one sentence. History can be edited, but it doesn't make it true. Then I pressed send. The screen glowed briefly. Ping, ping, ping. I didn't read them, but I saw the names. Darian. Mom, why would you do this tonight? Vera. That's unfair. You're being dramatic. Silas. Let's talk when you're calmer. Calmer? I locked the screen and slid the phone back into my bag. Calm wasn't the problem. Erasure was. They had erased me carefully, strategically. They replaced stories with cleaner ones, rewrote origins, cropped me out with. I paused outside the glass doors, one hand resting on the cool surface, the other clutched around the strap of my purse. Inside, the music swelled again, something jazzy and harmless. Through the shimmering light of the chandeliers, I saw Darian laughing, head tilted back, shoulders loose, as Vera's father leaned in with some story. He wasn't looking for me. He never had been. That was enough. I turned from the door and stepped into the night air. The temperature had dropped slightly, just enough to make my breath visible. My heels clicked across the concrete, slow and steady, as I made my way toward the farthest row of parked cars. The closer I got to the edge of the lot, the thinner the crowd became. A few guests stood near their Teslas and Range Rovers, chatting about brunch plans and new wine subscriptions. No one noticed me. Or maybe they did, and chose to keep their eyes on things easier to digest. A man with a camera around his neck turned as I passed under a light. He raised the lens without thinking and snapped a shot, probably just another guest photo to add to the montage. He had no idea what he'd just captured. I unlocked my car, slid into the driver's seat, and closed the door behind me. The sound of the party muted instantly, like someone had shut off a faucet. Inside the silence, the only noise was the soft hum of the engine and the buzz of my phone in the passenger seat. I didn't touch it. I sat still, staring through the windshield as my breath fogged the glass. Back inside, I imagined the conversations unfolding, the ones that would follow the messages I'd left behind. They would notice soon. Vera would realize the group chat had gone silent. A cousin or bridesmaid would ask, "Hey, where's his mom?" Darian would shrug, toss it off with a casual, "She probably had to leave early." But it wouldn't sit right. It would start with whispers. One bridesmaid would show another the screenshots, the photos I posted, the invitation with the wrong name, the velvet box, the seat next to the trash bin. Someone would ask Vera, "Wait, that necklace was from your side of the family?" And the panic would start to flicker behind Vera's perfect smile. A relative, maybe one who hadn't seen me all night, would ask Darian, "What's this about your mom sitting by the service door?" And Darian, who had spent the evening performing, would fumble, because the story had unraveled. The script had a hole. Vera would try to spin it, of course. She was being dramatic. We offered to seat her with everyone else, but she didn't want to make a fuss. But now there were receipts. The story wasn't just mine anymore. I reached for the buzzing phone, turned it face down, and shut it off without looking at a single message. The envelope was still in my purse. Untouched. I didn't need to open it to know the truth inside. They had returned it to make a point, and I had received it loud and clear. But I had made mine too. I adjusted the rearview mirror, took one last look at the venue, the glowing entrance, the flickering lights, the facade they had all worked so hard to perfect, and I drove away. No one chased me, no one called out. But someone, somewhere in that crowd, would remember the woman who walked out without raising her voice, without slamming a door, without giving them the meltdown they'd anticipated. She left with grace, and sometimes grace is the loudest form of resistance. The morning sunlight spilled into my kitchen, through half-open blinds, soft and golden, touching everything it hadn't touched the night before. The silence in my house was familiar, comfortable even. Not the kind you get from being ignored, but the kind you choose. I stood barefoot on the linoleum, fingers wrapped around a warm coffee mug. The smell of hazelnut drifted up, grounding me. My coat from last night was still draped over the chair. I hadn't unpacked. No rush. There was no one here to demand an explanation. No one to pretend they hadn't seen what I'd posted. My phone remained face down on the counter, still off. I didn't need it to know what it held. Regret too late, apologies dressed as justifications, and a dozen variations of, "You should have said something sooner." I didn't need to hear any of it. Instead, I hummed an old song my mother used to sing when she washed dishes, some tune she picked up from the radio before I was born. I never learned all the words, just the melody. It was enough. When the mug was empty, I finally reached for the phone and turned it on. The screen lit up with missed calls. One from Silas, several from Darian. The message previews stacked like dominoes waiting to fall, but only one stopped me in my tracks. It was from Letha, my granddaughter. "Grandma, I saw you leave. I wanted to sit with you." I read it twice, and then a third time. Out of everything that had been said, or not said, that night, this one line cracked something open in me. Not in the way pain does, not like breaking. More like a window being unlatched, letting in air that hadn't moved in years. I sat at the kitchen table, pulled out a pad of paper, and began to write. Not to them, not even to her, but to myself. "Dear Ardelia," I began, "this is for the version of you that gave up vacations to pay for textbooks, who spent nights hemming pants and mornings packing lunches. For the woman who stood in the back of auditoriums, clapping silently, while others took the credit. For the mother who didn't get her name in a speech, but shaped every word of it anyway." I kept writing. You were there, even when no one saw you, even when they chose not to. I ended it with love, the mother they'll one day remember. I folded the letter and slid it into an old envelope from a bank statement I'd never bothered to file. Then I stood, walked to the small bookshelf in the corner, and tucked it inside a hardcover I hadn't opened in years. I didn't cry. I didn't even sigh. I printed the photos I'd posted to the group chat, 3 in total. The misnamed invitation, the necklace in my hand, and the table beside the trash. I placed them inside a single black frame and set it on my shelf. Not out of bitterness, but because sometimes the truth needs witnesses. And if no one else would be one, I would. I didn't call Darian. I didn't text Vera. I didn't need their closure. Instead, I picked up my phone and opened a new message to Letha. Next time, I wrote, "Sit by me first." I stepped out into the sunlight, let it touch my face. The world hadn't ended. But mine? It had changed. Not with a bang, not with a scream, just with a slow, quiet walk to the car and a choice not to go back. And sometimes, that's all it takes. Sometimes the hardest part isn't being forgotten. It's realizing you were never meant to be remembered the way you hoped. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that silence is not surrender. You can reclaim your voice without shouting. You can draw your boundaries without burning bridges. And you can walk away, not in anger, but in dignity. To those of you watching who've ever felt erased, overlooked, or quietly pushed aside in your own family, I see you. Maybe you were the one who always showed up, but never got the credit. Maybe your love was loud in effort, but quiet in recognition. Let me ask you, have you ever had to choose peace over presence? Have you ever walked out of a room not because you were weak, but because you finally understood your worth? If this story spoke to you, even a little, drop a 1 in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from. If it made you think of someone else, share this with them. And if it made you feel seen, I'd love to hear your story too. And hey, if you made it this far, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We've got more real stories, heartfelt lessons, and quiet truths coming your way. Let's grow this space together, one story at a time.